The proceeding will start shortly. 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 The proceeding will start shortly.
Bingo. Order. Order. I call Catherine McKinnell to move the motion.
Thank you, and I beg to move that the House has considered E-petition 617155 relating to the cost of living and parental leave and pay. It's a real pleasure to have you in the chair, Mr McCabe. This petition asks the government to increase statutory maternity pay in line with the cost of living crisis. And I have to say, I'm sorry that this debate unfortunately coincides with events in the chamber that are taking the attention of an awful lot of members as they debate the privileges report into the former Prime Minister. I do think the situation does rather highlight how such important matters that concern the people that we represent do not get the attention they need in this place or in government because of issues that are being debated today. This very important petition asks the government to review statutory maternity pay in line with inflation and the cost of living, noting that the cost of living has been increasing across the UK since early 2021, and the impact of inflation on the affordability of goods and services for household has been significant. Mr McCabe, raising a child is a gift, and I'm fortunate to know from experience the joy of being a parent, just as I also know the many challenges that parenthood can throw up too. However, I want to outline in my speech today, on behalf of the petitioners who brought this to our attention here in Parliament, that this gift of parenthood is being eclipsed for many by the mire of spreadsheets, cost-cutting and damaging health effects that the cost of living, which has shot up over the last year or so, is impacting. The petition's creator, Nicola Sheridan, who's here with us today, counts herself as very fortunate. She is a meticulously organised professional who made many plans in advance of having her baby, looking at the many costs and saving up for a safety net so that she could take a full year away with her son, Harry. But whilst following the news during her pregnancy, that first year of his life and hers, which she so carefully planned, was continuously thrown into doubt by soaring costs. Excitement was replaced by fear and anxiety. And I'm grateful to Nicola for sharing her experience of these spiralling costs that I know many parents are facing, because I've heard from them ahead of this debate. Nicola's experience is by far not unique. And I think the number of signatories to this petition would indicate there are many parents that have either experienced the same level of anxiety or certainly share the concerns. Charities and campaign groups have also been campaigning on this issue, and understandably so. And I'm very grateful to Pregnant Then Screwed, Maternity Action and the Institute of Health Visiting, who, when I met with them prior to this debate, impressed on me these stresses that parents are feeling, and I will expand on this in more detail as I go into my speech. Alison Woodhead and Catherine Slocum of Adoption UK shared the very distinct pressures that adoptive parents face, whilst Dr Alan Gregoire from the Maternal Mental Health Alliance set out really clearly the scientific case for early years investment. The Child Poverty Action Group stressed that inequality has worsened, and that is embedded by a lack of support for low-income parents. But from all the people I heard from, one message was resoundingly clear. Failure to adequately support new parents in the face of the worst cost of living crisis for generations will have a profoundly damaging consequences for parents and children, both in the short and the long term. The headline inflation figure remains stubbornly high at 8.7% from a peak of 11.1% last October, but the inflation is only half the story. It's been concentrated in the fundamentals that new parents rely on: heat, food, and personal care goods. The spiralling cost of energy has been widely reported and has outsized food inflation, which rose 19.2% in April this year. Receiving less attention has been the startling rise in goods essential for looking after a newborn. Since March 2021, the cost of formula milk has risen by 24%, with the cheapest own brand option increasing by 45%. Last year, in the 12 weeks to the 19th of August, the price of Pampers rocketed up to 60%. Meanwhile, statutory maternity pay, statutory paternity pay and maternity allowance have risen by 10.4%. It's not hard to do the maths. There are two primary concerns with the way in which this uplift is calculated and administered. Firstly, the uplift only comes in once a year, and it uses CPI from the 6 months before. And as a result, it's by design the money that new parents receive from the government will be out of step with what they actually need. Secondly, many feel that the financial support for new parents anyway is simply not enough. The current statutory rate for parents is £172.48. Compare that to the minimum weekly wage for an average 37.5-hour week, which comes in at £390.20. So when the added costs of a new child are considered, cots, prams, clothes, food, formula, many parents are left with big holes in their budgets. Indeed, the support for parents is not generous at the best of times. The UK has one of the least generous support programmes for new mothers among OECD countries, with only Ireland and the USA offering less. And a near unprecedented cost of living situation added into that state of affairs, and we're not far off from a crisis. I know it's easy to slip into a jumble of numbers when discussing the cost of living crisis, so I wanted to focus on the reality for parents, especially mothers, on the ground. And we know that women are still providing the majority of the childcare, and significantly more than men. And when we talk about the impact of the cost of living on parents, we absolutely must include fathers in that too. But I think we have to focus on the stress and the strain of raising a baby, and that is often borne by mothers. So preparing for this debate, I spoke to a group of really inspiring and strong mothers from Newcastle, alongside the charity Children North East. The reality of modern motherhood that they painted was wrought with challenges. Stress was a recurrent theme, as mothers described the anxiety that this rampant inflation is causing them, and it's making budgeting almost impossible. Mothers dismissed the government's promise of free childcare as a myth, as cost pressures force nurseries to charge for nappies and food, and the numbers of hours and weeks that's covered by the government scheme do not match with working reality. I think for those mothers, labelling it as free feels rather like an insult. One mother spoke vividly of being a new mother as one of the most challenging moments in your life. Her overarching view of being a new mother: it's just so stressful. Everything is new. Your hormones are all over the place. Even if you do make a plan, the stress can be overwhelming. We're going to end up with a mental health crisis, and we're going to ask why. And that's even before she's factored in the struggles with budgeting. So add in that impact of being a new mother on top of wondering whether you can even afford formula for your baby, and it's very clear the stresses and strains that new parents are under. Soaring prices and a lack of support are leaving mothers on the brink. And I fear that the government just doesn't get this reality for new mothers on low household incomes. The government's response to the petition justified current statutory pay levels and saying that they're higher than other out-of-work benefits. This line rankled many mothers, and not without cause, because being a mother, a new mother especially, is far from being out of work. Motherhood is work. As one mother told me, it's the hardest job you'll ever do in your life. You're left alone, weakened after often traumatic childbirth, with a tiny person that you're entirely responsible for keeping safe and nurturing. Waking up through the night to feed them, breastfeeding, changing nappies, playing games, placating them when you have no idea what's wrong. The government would do well to stop calling this out of work. For many prospective mothers, fathers and adopters, the joy of adopting and welcoming a child has been subsumed by anxiety stemming from financial concerns. Paired with this, the tightening of budgets leads parents to spend less on heating, less on healthy food, and that affects their mental and their physical health, as well as the mental and physical health of their child. In preparing for this debate, the Petitions Committee conducted a survey of petitioners made up largely of current parents and prospective parents. 93% of new parents who responded thought that the government support was inadequate, and a staggering 89% of new parents recorded difficulty accessing basic equipment like a pram. Faced with such crippling financial hardship, mothers are missing meals, going without heating, cutting down on all spending on themselves. One parent told us the lack of financial support is a constant stress and worry, whilst 92% of parents reported financial difficulties accessing social activities as basic as visiting family and friends. And it's difficult to overstate the importance of these social activities. Raising a child is a full-time job, and it can be incredibly isolating. Moments of happiness can be interspersed with profound periods of loneliness, stress and vulnerability. Family and friends provide that vital relief and support. Take away a mother's ability to even visit people can prove overwhelming. 97% of new parents who responded to our survey were concerned about the impact of having a child on their mental health, and we're already seeing a decline in parents' mental health. In January, the Institute of Health Visitors found that 83% of health visitors reported an increase in perinatal mental illness. We must be clear, financial and mental stress also have a direct impact on children. Dr. Alan Gregoire, who has studied the impact of early adversity on children, found that from the moment of conception, poor maternal mental health has an impact on babies, leading to worse outcomes across health, educational attainment, and happiness later in life. The stakes are incredibly high, and we are storing up problems for the future if we don't address this. Any government that looks at the evidence has to conclude that early years support for parents and children must be a priority. And it'll be little surprise to members that the cost of living is having a disproportionately large impact on the poorest mothers and babies in our society. We already know that inequalities lie at the root of poorer outcomes for pregnant women and infants, but these are now being compounded by this cost of living crisis. 91% of health visitors have observed an increase in poverty affecting families alongside an increase in families needing food banks. I've spoken in this place before about the impact of poverty on child development. It's a big issue in my region, and the numbers are staggeringly high of children growing up in poverty. But it's a vital point, and it's worth repeating. Poverty leads to worse educational attainment, worse physical health, worse employment prospects, and worse life expectancy. Poverty even leads to higher risk of neonatal death. So these outcomes cannot simply be accepted. The government has a responsibility to act. For example, Healthy Start vouchers are an important lifeline for struggling parents, allowing them to access nutritious food that we know is vital for child development. But after the digitisation of the scheme, take-up was more than 10% of the government's own rather modest target of 75% in March. Yet there's no clear plan to improve the uptake. It's well within the government's scope to change this, and I hope that the Minister will respond to this point specifically. Further, as Pregnant Then Screwed and others have pointed out, the UK is one of the most complicated parental pay systems amongst developed countries, resulting in many parents missing out on the support that they're entitled to. Difficulty accessing government support is particularly acute for adopted parents. They're not entitled to the same support as other parents, and self-employed adopters have no statutory right to parental pay whatsoever. So even when that support exists, access is clouded in uncertainty. Self-employed adoptive parents can apply to local authorities for grants, but it's entirely discretionary whether that money is given or held. The APPG for Adoption and Permanence has found that 90% of adopters said their social worker had failed to advise them to apply directly to the local authority. So even those working in this field can't work out the system. Adopted children are already especially likely to have specific and costly needs that can take a significant financial toll on adoptive parents. And the cost of living is making the situation worse. 9 out of 10 prospective adopters told Adoption UK that the cost of living is having an impact on whether they choose to adopt or not. Of course it is. This is the impact of the cost of living. Children most needing of loving and supporting families being left in homes and in foster care. Government inaction has meant a child's start in life could be determined by nothing more than their postcode. The next generation will be defined permanently by today's inequality if we do not take action. I also heard from a mother who spent most of her time worried when applying for a support that was available that she was getting it wrong, and so she cut access to some of the supportive payments because she was so nervous about getting it wrong and having it clawed back. So even when parents are entitled to support, the lack of clarity and complexity in the system causes great anxiety for parents on top of the sleepless nights looking after their children. It's probably the sleepless nights inducing the anxiety, and it's a vicious cycle for many parents. Inequality becomes embedded early, and it's self-fulfilling. Intervention at the earliest possible stage is our best defence against it. The earlier the intervention, the earlier the rolling snowball of inequality is halted. Money today will have drastic benefits in terms of positive impact further down the road. And it's not just wishful thinking. Game-changing early investment has happened before, and it could work again. Sure Start, introduced by the last Labour government, led to around 13,000 fewer hospital admissions in older children each year, according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies. At a time when our NHS is severely overburdened, the case for early intervention couldn't be stronger. The next Labour government has said it will introduce free breakfast clubs for all primary school children, a vital investment that will ensure children have access to healthy food and have full stomachs so that they're ready to learn. And let's remember, many parents that have taken time out to have a baby will often have older siblings that they are trying to feed as well. This is the kind of investment in the future that will stem from these years of inequality that we have seen grow. We also know that in the earlier stages of life, time spent with parents is vital for children. What's more, parents want to spend time with their children. Research by the Trades Union Congress has found that 1 in 5 dads are foregoing all paternity leave because of financial concerns, whilst mothers are being hurried back into work because statutory pay simply doesn't go far enough. I will.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. She's making an excellent and powerful speech. On that final point that she just made, does she agree with me that with the statutory paternity and maternity pay levels so low, I think they're less than half the full-time pay at minimum wage, actually parents aren't being given any choice, and choice is so important. And as she says, the research shows that in those early days of a baby's life, having a parent at home, whether it's the mother or indeed the father, is critically important, and particularly given this cost of living crisis where people are struggling with mortgages and soaring food prices, they just can't afford to take the option of staying at home, and they're being forced back to work before they want to go back.
I absolutely agree with the Honourable Lady, and she raised the dreaded mortgage issue, which I haven't even touched upon, but that is a cliff edge that if they haven't already gone over it, it is looming ahead of many families as well. One of the mothers that we spoke to told the Petitions Committee survey that I and many other women felt they had to go back to work at 6 months because it just wasn't possible to continue. No mother should have to go back to work for any other reason that it's right for them and their family and it's right for them in their career. If they want to stay off for the full statutory entitlement, that should be their choice, as rightly pointed out by my honourable friend. Those first months with a newborn are irreplaceable. You never get that time back. Yet unsupported parents are being left with no choice. And I think that is a really key point here. Some mothers may want to go back much earlier, and that is their choice. The difficulty is for parents who want to stay off longer, often that choice is taken away by the reality of soaring prices and a real shortfall in support. Mothers are being stranded in that impossible situation of completely torn in two by their work and their child-caring responsibilities. And many parents that do go back then find how unaffordable it is because of the soaring costs of childcare. The motherhood penalty has for so long suppressed mothers' earnings power and independence, and for that short period of time where they have that small child at home, it can affect their earnings for the rest of their lives and the rest of their career. Several of the mothers that I spoke to in Newcastle spoke of the isolating impact of fathers being required to return to work and not being able to take that period of parental leave that I think many mothers would love to see the father of their children be able to take. One mother even said, as a mum, you're left alone on your own after 2 weeks, and it is terrifying. I remember that feeling. Another described the claustrophobia of being left with her children day in, day out, without respite, saying, you see your husband go out the door to work and you just want to race out the door with him. Frightened and alone, new mothers are being let down. A broken childcare system, fathers feeling as if they're unable to leave, and the negative mental and physical health of impacts of raising a child are amplified by the cost of living, and it's confining women back into their homes. The gender inequality that we should have left in the distant past is creeping back into our lives. And it just feels on this point that the government is asleep at the wheel.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way again. She's been very generous. Just on the point of fathers, I'm really passionate about this issue because we're seeing it in families up and down the country, including my own, where the father is taking the primary responsibility for looking after children. I'm really proud that it was the Liberal Democrats in government that introduced shared parental leave in 2015, but sadly the take-up has been far too low. So we need to build on that, improving pay, and I think we should be making all parental leave for mothers and fathers, whether they're employed or self-employed, a day one right. Does she agree with me, and does she agree that also paternity leave should be increased from the very short 2 weeks? It's about, on average, I think 10.4 weeks across advanced economies.
So the Honourable Lady speaks very passionately about the impact that having availability of parental leave. I mean, I'm not here to make neither government policy nor Labour's front bench policy. I'll leave that to the two front benches that are here to speak on behalf of the main parties. But I can speak for the petitioners. And one who spoke to me said that increased paternity pay and leave would be the dream. It would have stopped it all being on me. And I think quite often the petitioners who have brought us all here today say it better than many of us could. The Petitions Committee has previously highlighted the further action that has to be taken to protect expectant and new parents from redundancy by making it illegal from the moment employers are notified to 6 months after maternity leave is over. And we're proud as a committee of some of the work we've done to see some of those changes in government. So I would like to put a few questions specifically to the Minister on issues that I've raised throughout my comments today, and I'm sure she's been scribbling notes already. But will the Minister commit to reviewing the way in which statutory maternity pay, statutory paternity pay and maternity allowance are calculated so that the pay better reflects the rate of actual inflation, so the money that parents are getting isn't diminishing before their eyes, because that seems to be the source of a huge amount of anxiety, which I'm sure the government should appreciate. What is the Minister doing to ensure every mother knows the support that they're entitled to? Too often, parents seem to lack the information necessary or be given incorrect information and miss out on vital support. Will the Minister consider equalising access to statutory parental pay for adoptive parents, including adoptive parents who are self-employed? And can the Minister account for why the take-up of Healthy Start vouchers continues to remain below the government targets? And what is the government doing to improve that? It is within their gift to do so. And finally, what recent assessment has the government made on the impact of maternity pay rates on the social outcomes of health for new mothers and babies? It's really important that we monitor what can be assessed, and outcomes for children can be very clearly assessed in those age 2 developmental assessments. And sadly, the indications are that these are getting worse, not better. And the petitioners today would certainly indicate that improving support for new parents would have a big impact on improving those outcomes in those age 2 development assessments. The current status quo doesn't need to be permanent. Yes, we're in a cost of living crisis, but we can change this, and we can change it for the youngest people in our society to make sure it doesn't have long-term negative consequences. But that takes a government to listen to the concerns raised by petitioners and to take action. It's a complex issue, and there are a multitude of stakeholders that will be engaged in this, but at its core is that profoundly important experience of raising a child. If our society allows having a child to become unaffordable, then quite simply, fewer and fewer parents will choose to have children. One new parent told us, having children in 2023 is no longer a choice you make with a partner, it's a calculation you make on a spreadsheet. This is a cold reality of modern parenting in the UK. Western societies are threatened existentially by ageing populations and falling birth rates, and that need to pay our pensions. Yet our government is standing by whilst this car crash is happening in slow motion. The cost of living crisis shines a sharper light on a situation that was already becoming untenable. And to return to Nicola, the petition's creator, this is a broken system, and even the best prepared mothers feel they have no option but to create a petition to get the government to listen and do something. So rather than stable, financially secure homes, through no fault of their own, children today are being born into precarity, with parents burnt out by stress and isolated by incomes shrinking relative to inflation. So I urge the government to look seriously at what can be done for new parents, whether it's following up on the recommendations of the petitioners by linking statutory pay to the cost of living, by better expanding paternity leave, by making sure that more support is available for new parents in other ways. The one thing is absolutely clear from the plethora of evidence I've taken ahead of this debate today: doing nothing is not an option.
The question is that this House has considered E-petition 617155 relating to the cost of living and parental leave and pay. As the mover said, it's unfortunate this debate has possibly been affected by events elsewhere, but nonetheless, we're blessed to have the omnipresent Jim Shannon, who I call now.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm going to lead the charge of the backbenchers all by myself, and I don't intend to speak too long. What I will do is do my customary 10 minutes or thereabouts. And first of all, can I just say what a joy it is to follow the Honourable Lady for Newcastle upon Tyne North. Obviously sets the scene incredibly well, Mr. Chairman, from a knowledge as a mother, first of all, which brings a real example for the debate, first of all, but on behalf of all the other mothers out there who have to make these decisions, quite difficult decisions. We've had a number of debates in the past, Mr. Chairman, debates where the Minister has been in position to respond. I know the Minister grasps these things very, very well, and I'm very, very hopeful that we can have those answers that the Honourable Lady is asking for, and myself and the front benches of the shadows will do likewise. Cost of living is difficult for so many people, but especially for young families. I am thankful that we have a form of maternity leave in this country, as opposed to other devolved nations, such as the United States, who are severely lagging behind. But the fact is that if we look at other nations, we can see that we are not so far forward after all. When Sandra, my wife, and I married in 1987, we both wanted children, and that was our decision. And a different age, by the way, let's be quite clear now. And I had my own business, so it meant that I was able to afford that, and made sure that, or ensured, along with Sandra's say so, that she would stay at home and rear the children. So when my 3 boys have grown up to be wonderful young men, I can't take any credit for that. My wife takes the credit for that. And there are 3 young men who have established, have their own wives, and they have 2 children each. So we're very, very blessed to have that. So I want to bring in, as an elected representative, Mr. Chairman, I think one of the things that always affects me in the office, especially, is whenever you see people who come along and you just know that the pressures of finance, and the Honourable Lady who intervened in early on the mortgage issue. I watched the news last night, Mr. Chairman. The effect of mortgages whenever your tenure comes to an end is, I really, Mr. Chairman, I really wonder how people are going to afford it. The cost last night on TV, they illustrated for going from 2.9% to 5.6%, and the cost that they accumulated over all the years, it's massive. One of those mortgages last night was an accumulation of some 26,000. Another one's accumulation of 14,000. I mean, this money just don't click your fingers, Mr. Chairman, and the money appears. There's no money tree at the bottom of the garden where you can go and pick the money off the leaves. It's not that sort of a thing. It's not the real world we live in. So I do really understand the burden that's coming down the road. When you get that wonderful news, or for some the not so wonderful news, because that sometimes is what happens as well, you know. Yeah, it doesn't change your love for the child, by the way. I make that quite clear, okay. But it is important. Yeah, you're always very pleased. And I wanted 3 boys. I got 3 boys, and my wife wasn't just quite so sure, but there you are. That your family's expand when it comes to the natural worry of how money will stretch. This is never as true as it is today. Yeah. Coming out of our constituency offices, Mr. Chairman, coming out of the stories from those who come and tell us the burdens they have, the troubles they have, and tell us and ask us how to help them. I read an article by Smart Cells regarding the storage of baby stem cells, encouraging parents to consider this as a possibility. I mean, life's moving on, there's different ways of doing things, there's different technology, and this is one of them. Yet the bit that stood out to me in the article was that the working out, which stated that through independent data, sources and research online, on average, families in the UK spend around £6,000 during the first year of their baby's life. Wow. For some of the people who are going to be looking at new mortgages and new interest rates, that's the price of their mortgage, and therefore it becomes a big problem. This is for the mummy who is able to breastfeed, and many do, but for those who can't, you must add the cost of milk, sterilising equipment, bottles, etc., and other endless costs. So those are real burdens, or can become real burdens as well. I must say that the budget that is allowed £350 for a year's worth of clothing. My wife informs me, as a grandmother now, and we have 6 grandchildren. The last one was born in October, Ezra, 8 months old now he is. A real lovely wee boy, not because he's my grandchild, by the way, but he is a lovely wee boy, and we love him greatly. But I can understand that how my son Luke and Rachel have to find the money to look after Ezra when they already have wee Freya as well. So those are, they wanted 2 children. It's quite clear what the purpose was. But at the end of the day, there is a real burden that comes with that. I believe that I am someone who's in touch with the normal families in my constituency, and my sons are currently in the baby stage at present. And I know quite clearly from them, through my wife, Sandra tells me all the time, that the financial strain that they have. My oldest son, Jimmy, told me at the weekend there that he had to fix his car. It needed new brakes, it needed a new battery, it needed all the work done to it. All of a sudden, Mr. Chairman, it was £600 out of a month's wage. Mortgage he has, mortgage has to be paid. The new rate will have to be paid, and that money has to be found. So that's where we are. For some, parents are able to step in, and the bank of Granny and Granda is something that's really important, and they'll help out and help with the purchase of a pram or a cot. But for many families, the strain is very obvious, and the matter of statutory parental leave must be addressed. I recall when Sandra and I were married and the first child arrived, that my mother had kept the cot and presented us with the cot way back in 1987. By the way, Mr. Chairman, it's the same cot that I was born and reared in. There was nothing ever thrown out in our house. So we got the benefit of that there overall, and we still have it as well, and we pass that on to the next generation. Because that's what Ulster Scots people do, Mr. Chairman. We make a good use of what we have. The rates by which these types of statutory payments are made come in two types, and that's the parental leave. Payments made at 90% of a normal weekly earning, or a flat rate, currently $172.48 a week. Both are paid at the 90% rate for the first 6 weeks, followed by whichever is lower of the 90% rate or the flat rate for the remaining 33 weeks. An entitlement of child benefit is then also made, and that will cover the cost of nappies and wipes for many children, never mind additional heating. And you can't have a cold house for a new baby. It just can't happen. It's not on. And there's so many things that you have to have for your baby, and we really must understand that. So those extra costs become real issues. If a family is working, their entitlement to a sure start maternity grant is severely limited, and perhaps the Minister might be able to give us some indication in this, because the Honourable Lady from Newcastle upon Tyne North set the scene so well and referred to this. And government have not upped the earnings brackets in line with inflation, and yet again it appears that those who are hardest hit again are those on low incomes, and these are charges which must be made, and made soon. So, Minister, I suppose I'm going to ask for one thing specifically. That would be the ask. The ask is to make sure that the government is able to respond, and hopefully in the response the Minister will be able to give us some encouragement and some help. For some women, the thought of returning to work after a year is difficult. For others, the ability to stay off for more than their 6 weeks at 90% is impossible. And it's clear that more must be done. Let me give a brief snapshot of some other countries. The Honourable Lady referred to it. Bulgaria offers new parents an incredible 410 days of paid leave. Bulgaria? Yeah. We should have matched in Bulgaria. Bulgaria's maternity leave covers 90% of the employee's salary through Social Security. All the Scandinavian countries are equally generous when it comes to maternity leave, and Norway is no exception. Norway has a flexible option that allows new mothers to take up 59 weeks on maternity leave paid at an 80% pay rate, or 49 weeks at full pay. Again, I give these as examples, Mr. Chairman, because I think it illustrates what other countries are doing and where they see the need to help. The father chooses to take up to 10 weeks or no leave at all, depending on the wife's income. These are countries, Mr. Chairman, which seem to accept the importance of enabling family units to learn to be family units at the hardest times. When a crying child enters a home, we know that the cries are made, and we have to, as a parent, reach out to help. The pressure on mum and dad is incredible, and when the weight of finance today is added in, many families can't take the strain. It is my belief, Mr. Chairman, that we must seriously consider our obligations in this place and increase the maternity allowance and the statutory maternity payment for every person, not simply accepting that those who work in civil service or health trusts can take 6 months off, while the mummy in the local shop, who we see in our office every day, is back to work after 6 weeks, because necessity is the mover for that, even though that means... A lady on last night was saying that if her mortgage changes, she's already having pressures of childcare, and she has to take time off from her business to give the childcare, which means that her income is reduced. There are so many equations in this thing, so we really do need fairness. And I support the calls of my colleagues in this place today that the change must be a priority for government. One of the things that was in the paper last week, Mr. Chairman, was a tax relief for those who have larger mortgages. And I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, and maybe not been the issue directly for the Minister here today, but Minister, I think if we're going to do something practical, honest, physically helpful for those people. And let's do that. Let's have a tax relief for the extra mortgage costs that come through, because if we do that, then we take the pressure off, and we make sure that people can retain their houses, can retain their homes that they've already invested so much money into, and at the same time have their family. I conclude with this, Mr. Chairman. I want to support families. Government is clear that family is a priority. The Minister said that before in debates in this House. I know others have said that. Well, if that is true, Mr. Chairman, and not simply words, then we need to do better. Maternity pay is one such way of doing better by our families, along with childcare help and an increase to the child benefit threshold, that we can and must make the immediate changes. I look to the Minister today to make those necessary steps. I'm very pleased to be part of this, very pleased to represent my constituents who have asked me to bring forward this. When this debate, and I noticed it was on about a fortnight ago or thereabouts, I'd already committed myself to come into this here to make that case. I'm indebted, we're all indebted to the Honourable Lady for setting the scene, and I look very much forward to what my friend and Shadow Minister will do as well. I know that we're all off the same hymn sheet, saying the same thing, and we all look to the Minister for a very, very positive response. Thank you.
Thank you. I call SNP spokesman David Linden.
Thank you very much, Mr McKee. It's a great pleasure to see you in the chair for this afternoon's debate, and as my honourable friend from Strangford has done, I pay tribute to the Honourable Lady, the member for Newcastle upon Tyne North, for opening the debate, and also welcome Ms Sheridan to the gallery and thank her for triggering this petition. I thought it would be helpful just to pick up actually where my honourable friend, the member for Strangford, left off. I too have actually a great deal of sympathy for the proposal that would introduce some sort of salary sacrifice scheme for mortgages. The reality is that I think 2.6 million fixed rate mortgages are due to expire before the end of the year. Unfortunately, in my case, my mortgage fixed rate expired in October last year, and so my mortgage has actually doubled in the course of the last year. Now, I, as a Member of Parliament, can obviously absorb that cost to a certain extent, but as my honourable friend from Strangford has outlined, for far too many families, that will simply not be the case. And it's perhaps no surprise that we end up in a situation where mothers, for example, are facing the indignity of having to ask for formula to be taken from behind the counter because there's a fear that it could be shoplifted. Now, the Honourable Lady in setting the scene is absolutely spot on that the cost of living crisis has been certainly my party's #1 priority, and we've been doing everything in our power to support our constituents throughout this incredibly difficult time. And it's because I've seen the impact of that crisis on my own constituents day in, day out, that I wanted to take part in this debate today. And I've seen the frankly devastating consequences of my constituents being unable to afford their weekly food shop and struggling to pay their energy bills. That is an irony that is not lost on people who live on an island that is energy rich. And whilst it is clear that this pervasive crisis is impacting everyone, it is without doubt the parents of young families that are feeling the belt tightening perhaps the very worst. However, I would caution colleagues that this is not necessarily a new issue. The government in Westminster, sadly, have a very long and torrid history of penalising young and single-parent households in particular. Now, my party, the SNP, has been consistent in urging the British Government to improve parental leave and pay. I certainly, upon arriving here in 2017, spent the first few years of my time in Parliament using just about every parliamentary mechanism possible to push the government to introduce legislation that would give additional leave and pay to parents like myself who had premature or sick babies, in addition to the maternity and paternity leave and pay that they're entitled to. And whenever I leave this place, whenever that may be, it will still be the proudest moment of my time as an MP that my colleague and friend, the Honourable Member for Cumbernauld, Kilsyth and Kirkintilloch East, chose to take on this cause for his private member's bill, which I'm pleased received royal assent last month. In short, it means that parents of premature and sick babies, as we had with Isaac and Jessica, will never again have to go through that terrible time. And so I pay tribute to all who joined that long and hard-fought campaign. Now, That will change the lives of thousands of families and will undoubtedly make life that little bit easier for parents who are already experiencing a difficult time. But it is worth noting that, yes, we've come so far, but we have so much further to go, and it's worth certainly noting that another colleague and friend of mine, the Honourable Lady Member for Lanark and Hamilton East, has campaigned tirelessly for paid leave for anyone who has suffered a miscarriage. And alongside these campaigns, my party has continually, as with others to be fair, called upon the British Government to improve parental leave and pay generally. I think this is an issue that is more important than ever, not just in the face of the ongoing cost of living crisis, but also in recognition that the world of work is changing. And against the backdrop of that cost of living crisis, it's certainly concerning that among OECD countries, the UK has the second lowest payment rates for maternity leave. Less than 1/3 of gross average earnings are replaced by maternity leave, and despite lengthy maternity leave entitlements, full rate equivalent paid maternity leave lasts only 12 weeks. Now, as an SNP MP, I obviously disagree with the fact that employment law is reserved to lawmakers here in Westminster. Similarly, I remain bemused, as does the Scottish Trade Union Congress, that the Labour Party refuses to support the devolution of employment law. But whilst such powers still rest here, I must urge the British Government to increase maternity and paternity pay, review the eligibility for maternity allowance, give partners an additional 12 weeks paid leave on a non-transferable use-it-or-lose-it basis within shared parental leave. And it is, Mr McCabe, truly appalling that workers still do not qualify for statutory maternity leave and pay, including those in insecure contracts, such as 0 hours workers. So that's why I believe that the Conservative Government must act urgently to rectify this injustice by legislating to expand eligibility for statutory maternity leave and pay. However, the reality is that the British social security system is unjust and it penalises parents, particularly young families, and I would again, and I am fed up doing so, but I would again ask the Government to bring forward that long-awaited employment bill that could deal with some of these issues. Now, as the Honourable Lady, the Member for Newcastle upon Tyne North has outlined on behalf of the committee, the Petitions Committee has highlighted before that there is a real disparity in the treatment of maternity allowance and statutory maternity pay, particularly when it comes to universal credit that further penalises self-employed mothers and those on low incomes. And under the UC regulations of 2013, certainly in contrast to statutory maternity pay, maternity allowance is treated as unearned income by the DWP and it's deducted in full from UC awards. And I think for any of us who operate within the sphere of the DWP, it is clear that the two should be equalised, and I would certainly invite the Honourable Lady the Minister to address this in her remarks during the wind-up. But in addition to that, I think that the Government must end the young parent penalty in universal credit, which denies single parents under 25 years old the same level of social security as those above that age, pushing those impacted into poverty. And I would pay tribute to One Parent Families Scotland, who campaign relentlessly on the young parent penalty. Now, it's also been a staple of my party to campaign to oppose the two-child limit and its associated rape clause, or as the Government prefers to call it by its Sunday name, the non-consensual sex exemption. This is a policy that has been on the statute books for far too long, and as I suspect the Minister will do and stand up and talk about the importance of families, it is rather difficult to do so when we have government policy that has a cap, a state cap on the number of children that the government will support, and more despicably, a rape clause with it as well. But these individual policies are all part of a larger picture, Mr McCabe, of the social security system that penalises the very poorest and the most vulnerable. And I know that as a committed member of the Work and Pension Select Committee like myself, you too see this every Wednesday morning when we take evidence, the evidence that is overwhelming that we need greater support. And the evidence that we get is the likes of that research from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, that shows that families with younger children, and particularly lone parent families, are predominantly headed by women, and they face that disproportionate risk of poverty. But Mr McCabe, it's clear that under the Tories the current social security system is inadequate, and it is now at the stage where it is frankly falling apart at a time when people need it most. The SNP have long called for the British Government to fix these fundamental flaws. However, the sheer reality is that with 85% of welfare expenditure and income replacement benefits reserved to this place, our hands in Scotland are tied. Yes, the SNP government in Holyrood can do what they can, whether it's with the baby box, the Best Start grant, the limited devolved benefits and powers that we've got. But the reality is that the vast majority of welfare decision-making remains in the hands of a Tory government that we did not vote for, and indeed one we have not voted for since 1955. Now, to name just a few policies, the Fair Work policy promotes fairer work practices across the labour market. The baby box ensures that every child begins life with the essential items. The Scottish child payment, not confined to just 2 children, by the way, is now £25 per week and has been described as game-changing by charities. Free childcare is provided to all 3 and 4-year-olds and eligible 2-year-olds, saving eligible families £5,000 per child per year, and I declare an interest as somebody who is a recipient of that. Now, the SNP is committed to social security being an investment in people, and it is part of the Scottish Government's national mission to tackle child poverty, levels of which are still far, far too high. Now, as such, in April, all Scottish benefits were uprated in line with inflation by 10.1%, at a cost of around £438 million. And in addition to that, £5.2 billion was also invested in benefits expenditure in the budget 23-24, supporting over 1 million people. Now, I could go on listing the policies that the Scottish Government have taken to support low-income families and to tackle child poverty, from the £50 million commitment to the Tackling Child Poverty Fund, providing £69.7 million for employability support for parents through the No One Left Behind approach, to providing £50 million for the whole family wellbeing programme, and a further £30 million for the Keep the Promise to care experienced children and young people. But the reality is we are doing all of this from our devolved budget whilst trying to mitigate against poor welfare decisions such as the bedroom tax, which is mitigated entirely in Scotland through discretionary housing payment. But I would always remind people back home that what we spend on nullifying the bedroom tax is money that we cannot spend, for example, on health or education. That is just the stark reality. But in conclusion, Mr McCabe, my party is committed to alleviating poverty and ensuring that people live in a fair and a just society. Yet, on the other hand, the Conservatives here in London are intent on deepening inequalities and cementing poverty and hardship across communities in Scotland where they have no democratic mandate. And yes, we can enact all of those policies that I mentioned just a moment ago with one hand tied behind our back. But for every additional pound that we spend on measures to help with rising costs, that must be funded from reductions elsewhere, given the largely fixed budget and limited fiscal powers that we have. And so the Scottish Government is using those limited powers and resources to do everything it can, but this must be matched by the Government here in London. Yet, with every day that the UK Government fails to use its reserve powers to adequately tackle the rising cost of living, it is demonstrating that independence is the only way for Scotland to boost incomes and build that fairer society at which the heart of social justice is so important. Thank you.
Call Opposition Spokesman Justin Meadows.
Thank you, Mr McCabe. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair this afternoon, and I would like to thank everyone who has spoken in today's debate. I think this is, despite the attendance, a matter of great importance to millions of people up and down the country, and I'm sorry to Nicola, the organiser of the petition, that there weren't more members here to speak. I'm sure that we're all aware that there is other business catching people's attention today, but I hope that those who've heard today's debate will see that there is a lot of interest and well-informed opinion about some of the challenges that new parents face. So I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Newcastle upon Tyne North, for her introduction. I thought it was a comprehensive overview of the challenges that new parents face. It was, I think she mentioned, I think really, and something this is I'm going to go on to in a little while, about the huge cost that new parents face and the increase that has led to in recent times, and the chasm between those costs and the rates of statutory maternity pay, which have also been discussed. She gave us a whole range of facts and figures to demonstrate that, but I think the personal testimonies that she gave from mothers that she has spoken to really hit home in terms of the real difficulties many people are facing. And I think that when she mentioned the government line that maternity pay is in line with other out-of-work benefits, that showed just really how completely out of touch whoever said that was, and really how there is a lack of understanding of about the huge workload that any new parent will face. She rightly identified loopholes with self-employment for adopted parents, and obviously that is something that needs to be addressed, because we know that it is a huge financial commitment to formally adopt a child, and those financial barriers need to be removed. She really, as I say, gave a very wide-ranging speech. She touched on childcare costs, the impact that maternity leave can have on a woman's pay for the rest of her life, something 50-odd years after the Equal Pay Act was introduced is still there, and maternal mental health, which again is something that I think is grossly underlooked at times. And her conclusion that having a child is a calculation that you make on a spreadsheet really hit home. You know, just I think all parents make, well, when they're planning a family, that they all look at that. But I think, you know, when you look at the costs that every household faces now, huge increases in housing costs, which has been touched on. You might have student loan repayments. You've got an increased tax burden, pension contributions that might need to be made, childcare costs. You can see how, for many, the sums just don't add up, and how that is really bringing home just what a challenge this is. It was a pleasure, as always, to hear from the Honourable Member for Strangford. It would not be a Westminster Hall debate without a contribution from him, and like him, I have 3 boys. I wonder how similar they are. It'd be interesting to compare notes at some point, but he made some very valuable points about the cost, in particular, of raising a family. £6,000 in the first year was, you know, it probably feels like more actually for many, but you know how quickly a baby grows out of their clothes in that first year, all the setup costs that you've got to face. We're very fortunate in my part of the world that there's a charity called Kids Bank, which is based in Chester, but operates in Ellesmere Port and Neston, which provides new parents with a lot of these essentials. It's all recycled and donated goods, but it is absolutely a critical thing for those families who are really on the breadline and need that support. But I think it shows you just how difficult it is to raise a family. And I'll give way, yep.
David Linden. More often than not, it is falling to the third sector to step in and support people. And does he agree with me that it is not a sign of the big society that these groups, however great the work that they are doing, are fulfilling? It's actually a sign of a broken welfare state that is fundamentally just beyond repair now?
Well, I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention. I hope it's not beyond repair. I think, you know, I sincerely hope that we are able to build the blocks back of society that have been dismantled over the last 13 years. But I think wherever you turn in society now, you will see the third sector stepping in, because the state has just not been able to meet the demand. And I think that is a signal that something fundamentally has gone wrong in this country. But returning to the contribution from the Honourable Member for Strangford, he mentioned the issue of mortgage costs, and I think that is something that, indeed, as other members have mentioned, is really going to become a huge issue over the next 12 months. I think for many, as the Honourable Member for Glasgow said, it's a live issue now, I think the implications of that are still being grappled with by government. And I think the Honourable Member for Strangford raised the examples of Scandinavian countries. Of course, they're always held up as the most progressive examples in terms of welfare support and progressive societies. And I'm sure that there is something to learn from those. And I think, Mr McCabe, it's important that that we don't see this debate as just something that's recently happened because of the cost of living crisis. I think that many of the extra pressures are ones that new parents have always faced, but they are particularly acute at the moment. And we know that many new parents have faced these pressures since time began, really. And in that context, I think it's important to just look at the issue addressed in the petition itself, which is the level of statutory maternity pay. And as we know, inflation has skyrocketed in the last 2 years, and while this year's increase in statutory maternity pay more accurately reflected the economic situation, we know last year's, for example, was an increase in statutory maternity pay of only 3.1% when inflation was running at the time at about 9%. But the particular impact of these individual figures do not, I think, capture the full picture. As my honourable friend, the member for Newcastle-upon-Tyne North, mentioned, inflationary increases in the essentials for parents have been particularly acute, and she traded some figures about some of those costs. I've got a few of my own, which we can pick whichever ones we want, but it shows far beyond the actual headline rate of inflation for new parents. One from the Mirror showed the increase in costs of 38% in a year. Another from the Guardian found that the cheapest baby formula had gone up 22% in a year. First Steps Nutrition Trust showed that the cheapest brands had gone up by 45% in the past 2 years, and other brands have gone up between 17% and 31%. There's a whole range of percentages there, which I think show us that this is an issue going way beyond the headline rate of inflation which statutory maternity pay is based upon. And as the recent Sky News report highlighted, theft of formula milk is becoming more prevalent. And I think, is there anything that symbolises more the current crisis in our country of images of formula baby milk stacked on supermarket shelves with security tags around them? I think that really is something that should send us a very clear message about what kind of country and crisis that we are facing. And as my honourable friend mentioned, we know how important it is for children to have that healthy start in life, and how those formative years can shape the ones that follow. And I do worry that some of the issues that we are talking about now, the fallout of them will be with us for many years to come. But on a more positive note, I would like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to all the charities and volunteers that do their bit to ensure that everyone has access to food and support when they need it. I think, as the Honourable Member for Glasgow said, that isn't something that we should accept as the norm. That should be not the substitute as a safety net for the state, but I think it is sadly where we are at the moment. And in my constituency, we have a number of great groups who help out in this way. West Cheshire Food Bank, the Whitby Cupboard, and the People's Pantry on Stanley Grange. And I recall visiting the latter fairly recently and being told by them just how much demand there was for formula milk, and how important it was for them to get donations of that. I think that really shows you just how much that has got out of the reach of many people. And of course, it's not just about formula milk. It's about the general increase in essentials. Food inflation just under 20% at the moment. Gas and electricity inflation reaching 129% and 67% at various points in the year. And as we've already discussed, mortgage rates shooting up for many people, resulting in instant requests for hundreds of pounds a month extra that people simply don't have. But of course, looking at inflation in years in isolation doesn't tell us the full story. If we go back to 2012, the basic rate of statutory maternity pay equated to 62.5% of a 35-hour week on the national minimum wage. But today, it just equates to 47.3% of a 35-hour week on the same rate of pay. We are towards the bottom of the league table in Europe on decent maternity pay, and women are only receiving around 25% of the average earnings. And as the Honourable Member for Stratford suggested, countries like those in Scandinavia tend to be doing far better on those metrics. And research conducted by Maternity Action shows that most women have concerns about money, with numbers worried increasing at an alarming rate. The cost of living crisis is biting in very real terms. In 2022, 64% of women who responded to the survey reported being worried about money when pregnant or on maternity leave. This increased to 71% this year. Widespread concerns about money are pretty much all-encompassing. Only 2% of those surveyed claimed they did not worry about money at all. 73% of women told Maternity Action that they struggled to buy the things they needed while pregnant or on maternity leave, of which 80% reported that they struggled a lot. And this, Mr McCabe, has practical consequences. 76% reported that it reduced the number of hours their heating was on, 70% turned down their thermostat, and 55% stopped heating whole rooms altogether. These choices, as we know, are made reluctantly and have significant consequences, particularly to newborns who, as a result of the cold, damp and mould, can pick up infections. Equally, some parents have reported that they have reduced the amount they spent on food. Half did this by buying less healthy food, over 1/3 reduced portions or skipped meals, and 1/4 prioritised giving food to their children over themselves. And just listen to some of the testimony collected shows the stark reality and the human cost of this situation. One respondent talked about the impact of cutting back on heating and said, "We did use the heating less at first, but my baby ended up with pneumonia and a lower left lung infection, so now we have reduced the thermostat instead." Another stated, "I've had days when the only thing I've eaten is the kids' leftovers. Some days my only meal is toast." Now, we know how hard it is to be a parent at the best of times, but being forced to make those kind of decisions can only add to the burden. So financial insecurity is one huge aspect of motherhood, but job insecurity is another aspect. Research has consistently found massive discrimination at work due to pregnancy. The Equality and Human Rights Commission estimated that in 2015 around 54,000 new mothers may be forced out of their job in some way due to their pregnancy. Similar findings were replicated by the group Pregnant and Screwed in 2020, which was actually based on a larger sample. And in between those surveys, the Taylor Review also reported that at least 1 in 10 employers, perhaps as many as 1 in 5, were not willing to support pregnant women and new mothers, as well as 1/3 believing that women should have to disclose family plans at an interview and be at the company for at least a year before being able to have children. Such views, Mr McCabe, really belong in the dark ages. So what has been the government's response to these shocking revelations? Despite being a manifesto commitment and being in the 2019 Queen's speech, expanding protections to pregnant workers and new mothers has not happened until this parliamentary session. 3 times in 3 previous sessions, private members' bills were left to flounder with none receiving a second reading, but thanks to the tireless campaigning and work by my honourable and gallant friend, the member for Barnsley Central, legislation has now received royal assent. And it's clear that the Protection from Redundancy, Pregnancy and Family Leave Act has the potential to better protect pregnant workers and new mothers, although the Act only gives enabling powers to the Secretary of State to pass new regulations and doesn't of itself introduce new protections. Although the bill's only had royal assent recently, we see no sign of those regulations. And I know it's not in the Minister's direct brief, and I wonder if she is able to update us when she responds as to when those regulations can be expected. And it would also be warmly received by us if she was able to tell us how long the protected period will be increased by, or at least who is going to be consulted on before such judgments are made. Given that the bill gave no indication of what the protected period would be or what requirements there would be on consultation before regulations were issued, there is a concern that we might end up at the end of the day with a bit of a damp squib. And of course, extending a period of protection is only as good as the protection in the first place. And as we've heard, tens of thousands of women face discrimination under the existing law. Something like a single enforcement body might help actually address this. And again, this was something that was being promised in that same Queen's speech. But since the employment bill has not surfaced, it seems that we have little hope of seeing that body before the next general election. And I'll turn briefly, Mr McCabe, onto the issue of shared parental leave, which a couple of members have referred to, because it's clear that it's not working and it needs to be urgently reviewed. The Women's Budget Group, an independent organisation that monitors the effect of government policies on men and women, has called the scheme complicated and said that because leave was shared, the onus on taking parental leave still often fell on the woman because men tended to earn more and therefore were less likely to want to sacrifice their salary as part of the arrangement. Ros Bragg, the Director of Maternity Action, said shared parental leave was brought in 7 years ago now and it's clear that it's not working. Take-up is woeful. Our advice lines are full of parents who want to share parental leave, but confusion around the rules means that they're completely baffled. Add to that the low level of pay on offer and the system seems almost designed to put parents off sharing leave rather than encouraging it. So the common view is that the shared parental leave system is too complicated, it's poorly understood by employers and parents, there are low rates of pay and the fact that not all workers qualify, including agency workers, those on zero-hours contracts and the self-employed, mean that it does need an urgent review. A government consultation on high-level options for reforming family-related leave and pay, including a right to neonatal leave and pay for parents with premature or sick babies, and proposals to encourage transparency about flexible working and parental leave policies, was launched by the government in July 2019, but the government has still not published its full response to that consultation. It has addressed some of the proposals, but not all of them. We are still waiting for the rest of it. It does seem, as always, Mr McCabe, that it will need a Labour government to come in and actually address these issues. And we will eliminate the restricted tire limits attached to statutory maternity pay, making it a day-one right. This will allow women to take control of their family planning. No longer will they be forced to plan one of the most important life decisions around the needs of their employer. We will also extend statutory maternity and paternity leave as urgently reviewing the failed parental leave system. Buttressing these reforms, as well as many others in the New Deal for Workers, which I encourage members to review, will be a single enforcement body that will possess extensive powers that will enable them to stand up for workers. And we understand that reforms to employment rights and protections require a multifaceted approach, one that really cannot work through the piecemeal approach we've seen from the government. After more than a decade in government, the Conservatives are holding women at work back, and it will mean that the Labour government, as the last Labour government did, will actually stand up for women and bring true equality into the workplace and beyond.
Thank you. I call the Minister, Mims Davies.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and it's a pleasure to indeed serve under your chairmanship, Mr McCabe, this afternoon. And I would like to also thank honourable members for joining us this afternoon, and the honourable member for Newcastle upon Tyne North, in particular for introducing today's debate so thoughtfully. Being a parent, as we've heard this afternoon, is an incredibly important and rewarding job. It is one that comes with a unique set of challenges, from recovering from birth, as we've heard this afternoon, with a newborn, to balancing employment and care, and in my particular own life, being a sandwich carer. So I absolutely understand the challenges. And if I may, Mr McCabe, just while I have the floor, just pay tribute to local firefighters who are battling a fire in Burgess Hill, my constituency, just this afternoon, with their members of the public being sent home and asked to be vigilant after another one yesterday in Sharpthorne. So if I may indulge, thank you very much. I just wanted to reflect as an 18-year-old coming into my house very shortly, and another teen, and as a single mum and a women returner. I really do get it, and I hope that some of my remarks today will absolutely reflect that. And I'll also be very clear that I can't answer all of the issues because they're not all in my remit, but I will undertake to write and share what I can and bring other departments to account. And of course, last week was Loneliness Week, and I think we've all as parents felt incredibly lonely and isolated. And as a single parent, it can be overwhelming and incredibly difficult. It can be hard work, of course, and the pressures are not new, but the pressures are definitely very challenging right now. But overall, it is a wondrous, joyous slog. Let's all be honest about that. And of course, we reflect just after Father's Day that actually the boost for general gender equality, for equal parent support is absolutely vital. And I thank Nicola for being here today and all the groups and charities that support parents through this precious and, as we all recall, challenging times if ours are a little bit older. And in fact, speaking of baby boxes, a slightly different one, I do remember my mum and dad gave me a sort of war chest, and they'd been struggling with long-term illness and not having a huge amount of money, but it was a labour of love and many trips to Poundland, and it really made a difference. So we know that everything when you start off really makes a difference when you're feeling that pressure and that big change of your life, particularly when it's your first child. And of course, added with the high inflation, Mr McCabe, and the challenges for the cost of living, the global pressures, you with that precious little bundle, it's very difficult. And that's why it is important that in April this year, we did indeed increase the rate of all statutory paternal payments by 10.1% in line with the CPI. And we will continue to take decisive action to help households, and I'll outline some more of those shortly. Now, as you'll know, it is always our firm belief that the best way to help people to improve their financial circumstances throughout their life is, of course, through work. But as the Honourable Lady opposite said, only when the time is right. And it's absolutely important that there is choice in this matter. And I strongly agree with the point she made. So, of course, we need to be ambitious for parents to be able to progress in work. And it can't only be people that don't have children that are able to progress in work. So we need to get it right. And we also need to be able to support children to have parents to be there when they feel the need and when they must be there and want to be there. And that's equally as valuable. So I think the flexible parental leave entitlements to new parents support just that. But I recognise the points made this afternoon about it being a complicated area, particularly take that on board. And I think it's vital, as mentioned this afternoon, that adopters get a better deal and are better assisted. That's something that my wider family have experience of, and that's really important too. And parents can and must have the access that they need for the range of support and entitlements for their child's first year, giving working families more choice and flexibility about who cares for their child when they are at work. So our statutory maternity leave entitlement, I think it's rightly generous, but I hear this afternoon not enough, and if only I had the magic wand this afternoon. So we do offer the 52 weeks of maternity leave, of which 39 are paid through that statutory maternity pay, and of course for self-employed women, and I've been one of those as well and known that insecurity, so I very much understand that, who are not eligible for statutory maternity pay. It's of course maternity allowance that is available. And both payments are designed to support women to stop working towards the end of their pregnancy and in those precious months after childbirth, in their best interests and in their baby's best interests, so that their health, well-being and above all bonding can be supported. And as mentioned today, and I fully recognise that opportunity that fathers can and must play, that crucial time in that child's first year. And I think this is, as I said, a real chance to boost gender equality and support parents. And I'll come on to that with some wider points later in my remarks, if I may. Statutory paternity leave and pay arrangements do enable employed fathers, Mr McCabe, and partners who meet the qualifying conditions to take up to 2 weeks of paid leave within those first 8 weeks following the birth of a child, or indeed a placement for adoption. And of course, we know that qualifying parents can share up to 50 weeks of leave and up to 37 weeks of pay. And shared parental leave challenges, rightly, as we heard from the Honourable Lady opposite, I think she was from Twickenham, if I've got it right, that's right, enables the opportunity for mothers who wish to return to work to do so, and rightly enabling fathers and partners to be that primary carer if those parents so wish. And we want more men to confidently take the helm, and employers can really help with that and understand that dads want and need to be there, and they want to be there at key moments. And it's not just the nativity or the parents' evening. And in fact, I'm the guilty party. I'm never there for the parents' evening, or it's sort of flipped around in my world these days. But the reality is, if men can confidently be there, then perhaps we can, as the honourable members opposite have spoken about, get the scheme, which started in 2015, to really boost in terms of take-up. Now, we are seeing between 2 and 8% of eligible couples taking part. That's what we forecasted. And now the actual take-up is broadly in line. It is increasing each year, but I don't think fast enough. And I think that's the challenge to us all in terms of how we make this something that people really feel that they can take part in. And now, in order to do that, Mr McCabe, the shared parental leave tool online is accessible for parents to check their eligibility and plan their leave together. And we are currently evaluating the shared parental leave scheme and will publish findings further in due course. And I think there's been a clear message today on the rates. The rate of all statutory parental parents' payments are reviewed annually, and as mentioned, generally in line with CPI. And this government has and will spend around £276 billion in 23-24 through welfare support in Great Britain. And I'll come on to some further support for those who may be listening this afternoon who perhaps haven't reached out for some additional help. And I understand the Honourable Lady's opposite point about the slightly indelicate link about out-of-work benefits and the support that we give to parents. And indeed, I note her comments on that, and I think I pretty much agree with her on it. So I will take that away in terms of how we talk about supporting people when they're out of work, or indeed how we support them when they're in the special position, let's be honest, of pregnant working women just coming up to that point where they want to do what's next is right for them, and those new mothers. Now, the government does spend approximately £3 billion on maternity payments. And I think there is a balance to strike, both in language here as well, and also about how we balance any changes to those rates of SMP. I think there's a balance about how you take account of economic circumstances, the affordability to taxpayers, but also understanding that we need to speak to stakeholders. Some of them have been mentioned this afternoon, and businesses. So, I think this needs to be a holistic effort. I think the honourable gentleman opposite gave a list of future plans that he may have. But in reality, we do want to make sure that those asks, both of the petitioners who've challenged us this afternoon and those sectors and businesses, make sure that we take people on any change journey, if that was the case. And I think we've talked about planning and saving and spreadsheets where needed. I was briefly, it feels like, married to an accountant, so I felt like I was living in a world of spreadsheets. But it's what we all have to do, and it is a challenge, isn't it? Particularly when you don't know what you don't know when it comes to parenting and the impact it's going to make on your back pocket. And I do think, though, that employers can do more. It was mentioned today, the work of the civil service. We've got a very tight labour market. If you've got a talented, skilled, brilliant woman who is either adopting or becoming a mum in whatever way, whether it's for the first time or growing that family, I think employers really need to think forward about job design and making it work for those women to return. And I mentioned earlier that I'm a single mum, but actually when I came to this place, I was a woman returner. And actually many of us are, and many mums, due to various reasons, have been locked out of the labour market for far too long and have an incredible ability and talent there. So, employers have a chance to look at job design. In fact, in my own constituency, Mr McCabe, Boeing have created a part-time role, a deliberate part-time role, not a role where you squeeze full-time into part-time, an actual role where you add value and do it in a way that works around your circumstances. And I think the labour market, if you have more people doing more, everyone will be doing better. So let's all challenge ourselves to that one. I want to try and answer some questions. They've given me an extremely long speech, so I'm going to try not to repeat things that many people will know and just try and answer some of the questions. In regard to the way that things are calculated, to the equal access for adoptive parents, I think hopefully I've covered that. I agree with the point around the Healthy Start needing a boost in regard to take-up, and I will take that away to work with colleagues. In regard of the point the Honourable Lady opposite meant in terms of outcomes and monitoring, I think it's a fair point, and of course note that. The Honourable Gentleman, my friend from Strangford, talked about tax relief, and it was reiterated by the Honourable Gentleman from the front bench from the SNP. I'm not in the Treasury, and I'm delighted about that every day until ever I get the call up, because absolutely that's a headache that I'll pass for as long as possible. And I say that very, very gently. Did I say that actually out loud? I did. But the point, it is a matter for them, and I do note that, and I'm sure they'll be listening to the fact that I'll leave them to get on with that one. In regard to the point of the Scotland Act, I'm delighted that the Honourable Gentleman from the SNP from Glasgow East is absolutely acting and using those powers. I'm delighted about that. And I note his under 25's point as well. That's not my policy area, but he knows I have a strong interest in youth policy and also in the single parents area, and that I have undertake to understand and take away. Just for those listening and engaging regarding concern around mortgages, I did say this in the Chamber this afternoon, and I reiterate, if you are worried, please engage with your mortgage lender. There is support for mortgage interest out there. We've abolished the zero earnings rule to allow claimants on UC to receive support while in working on UC, and support is now available after 3 months. So please do engage with your lender, and we've paid 25 million to 12,000 households in 21-22, and we'll continue to extend that support in mortgage support for mortgage interest rates. So please do engage with that and use the benefits calculator on .gov.uk if you are concerned at all. There is help for households there, and links to the Household Support Fund, which I'll come on to shortly. The Honourable Member for Glasgow East raised a concern also in regard to miscarriage leave. Now, miscarriage is a deeply challenging, personal, devastating experience for many women and partners and families. And, as we've got better in this place of talking about things much more, it's still, I think, too unspoken and too difficult to, quite often in the workplace. It's something a friend of mine recently spoke to me about. And the government believes that those individuals are best placed to know their own specific needs, and that good employers, rightly, will respond to requests made to their employees in a sensitive way. I feel the Honourable Gentleman is getting up, so please do.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way, and I do not intend to make this a party political point. And I think genuinely, in knowing the Minister very well, that there is a willingness to try and fix this particular issue. It is not something that should be hard. But I would caution the Government that simply hoping that employers do the right thing is not something that we can rely on in this place. You're right, the Minister is absolutely right. The vast majority of employers out there, if an employee went to them and said, I have had a miscarriage, can I have some time off, they would do it. But the reason that we legislate in this place is to make sure that the few are looked after. And it's for that reason that I think it's really important that the Government looks again and doesn't just leave this to the market, but steps in and does what the state does best.
Yeah, I thank the honourable gentleman for his point, and I understand the points he makes. It's not an area that I'm in charge of, but I'm sure those will be listening. And of course, if a woman is unfortunately in the situation where she has had a miscarriage, there is protections that extend 2 weeks after the end of that pregnancy, and that is protected by the Equality Act of 2010. But I understand the point about before 24 weeks, and this is a difficult one, and I think that's why Nicola and others bringing this to the House, making us focus on all of the issues, is absolutely the right thing to do. And I can nearly get myself in trouble enough this afternoon without creating any more policy on the floor of the House. So I shall refrain from that one. And I do appreciate the honourable gentleman's point in regard to the two-child policy. I know we disagree on this point in terms of families on benefits facing the same financial challenges and choices, I suppose, when it comes to growing their family as those who are solely supported through work. So it's important that child benefit continues to be paid for all children in those eligible families. But I do think it is right that we continue with that policy where appropriate. And of course, he mentioned those particular exemptions. Again, I note the point about it being a challenging area. In terms of the support around childcare, and it was raised opposite, that balance of childcare, returning to work and the right support for parents. The government's already put in more than £20 billion in the last 5 years to support families with the cost of childcare, and thousands of parents have benefited from government childcare support. And changes are coming, and we announced, of course, in the budget that by 27-28 we will provide £4.1 billion to expand the current free childcare offer to eligible working parents of children aged 9 to 36 months. And I recognise this government-funded free childcare to the recipient, needs design, and it was mentioned to a degree in the chamber this afternoon. But we are expecting to be spending more than £8 billion a year on that funding and early education. And this, indeed, Mr McCabe, represents the biggest single investment in childcare in England ever. I'm just going to quickly cover neonatal pay and pregnancy discrimination, because I think there are two areas that I'd like to cover, and then try to conclude, because I'm very mindful that I've spoken for some time. We are aware that more needs to be done to support parents whose children have gone into neonatal care, and I think many of us in this House know of people, indeed personally, who've been impacted by this. And again, this is where this House has come into its own in terms of talking about that and the impact on families. In March 2020, following a government consultation on the issue, we committed to introducing a new entitlement of neonatal leave and pay. Now, the Act will introduce an entitlement up to 12 weeks of paid leave for parents who have a child who's admitted to neonatal care. This entitlement will support new parents during the most stressful days of their lives and ensure that they can be there for their youngster. Now, the Act received received royal assent on the 24th of May this year, and we anticipate their entitlement will become available to parents in April 2025. So I hope that helps members. Yes, of course.
Minister, for giving me on that point. It was originally my bill, so I'm kind of familiar with this. There is a slight issue with HMRC dragging its heels a little bit, notwithstanding what she has said about not being a Treasury Minister. Would she at least undertake to write to HMRC following today's debate and outline that there is cross-party agreement? Indeed, her honourable friend, the member for Thornbury and Gate, has been excellent on this. That there is cross-party agreement, that the £15 million is committed in the budget line, but there is no need for us to have to wait that long because of this lag in HMRC guidance.
Mr McCabe, I understand the point the honourable gentleman is making, and I know it's a deeply personal bill for him, and he's going to be strident in his ask. So I understand that, and I'll take the ask away as he wishes me to. In terms of pregnancy and maternity discrimination protections, ensuring that parents, Ms McCabe, have the leave and the flexibility they need during this period. It's really important they are protected against discrimination and do not suffer any detriment for taking this leave. And that's why we're rightly extending pregnancy and maternity protection for those returning from periods of eligible parental leave. And the Protection from Redundancy, Pregnancy and Family Leave Act 2023 will enable redundancy protection to apply from the point an employee told their employer that they were pregnant and 6 months after returning from maternity, adoption or shared parental leave. This provision will protect individuals from redundancy and support mothers to remain rightly in the workforce. And of course, we know that support needs to go way beyond the first year of life, so it's important that there are further entitlements for others, and time off for dependents is something that's important as well, and I'll update the House on further on that. In regard to flexible working, I think it's important for me to just cover this. We're fully committed to ensuring that parents get the support that's right for them, and the Employment Relations Flexible Working Bill has completed its second reading in the other place on the 19th of May, and the bill will increase the number of requests to employee that can make in a 12-month period, reduce the time allowed to administer requests and support more effective conversations about what flexible working arrangements may work to the benefit of both the employer and the employee. And alongside the bill, the government will introduce the regulations, as mentioned, to make the right to request flexible working apply from the first day of employment, bringing an estimated additional 2.2 million employers into the scope of the legislation. And my understanding is as soon as parliamentary time allows, this will be moving forward. I mentioned cost of living support. Now, statutory parental pay is only one aspect of help for households. £94 billion across 22-23 and 23-24 is there to help people with those rising bills. £3,300 per UK household on average being supported, including in there is cost of living payments to over 8 million low-income households, around 6 million disabled people and over 8 million pensioner households. Now, I would say to anybody, please look at the benefits calculator, please look at Help for Households, please reach out to your local council or indeed your devolved administrations, because there is extra support out there. I'd like to close, Mr McKay, by reiterating the government's commitment to supporting parents as we continue to face high inflation. We understand the added and varied and complex pressures that we've heard and understood and discussed this afternoon, which parents are experiencing alongside the cost of living, the inflation challenges, which is why we've done the right thing with the raising up in line with CPI of statutory parental payments alongside other payments of 10.1%, and we'll continue to take decisive action to help all households. And I will reiterate to honourable members, and I thank them all for their contributions this afternoon, and the honourable lady for opening this petitions debate. I will continue to support women as long as I have breath and a seat in this House in any role that I have. And it's great that we all come together on something which is so important. Some areas, of course, will be disagreements on. But I think as long as we continue to work together to support parents at this most difficult time in any part of our community, I'm seeing some of my great charities and local food bank and other supporters on Monday, and there is additional support, by the way, from DCMS for local charities, then we will really make the difference and make sure that no parent, whatever situation they're in, no family ever feels alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Catherine McKinnell to wind up.
Thank you, Mr McKay. And thank you, Minister, for that response, which covered in quite some detail many of the issues that have been raised. And I also thank honourable members for their contributions today, the honourable member for Strangford and the shadow frontbench spokesperson from the SNP and from Labour. And I have to say, though, the government's response on broader help for households during this cost of living crisis is clearly welcome. But I do worry that speaking in such general terms does somewhat neglect the very specific challenges that parents are facing at the moment. And I mean, I could go back to all the statistics that we've looked at on the impact of cost of living on parents and on the challenges around the government support, which I know the Minister mentioned the headline figures, but the reality for parents that we're hearing doesn't match up to the big numbers that the government quote in terms of their experience of how anxious they are and how much they are struggling. But I actually want to focus my closing remarks on those mothers and fathers whose struggles have made this debate necessary today, because it is society's duty to look after our next generation, to protect them, to nourish them. And as parliamentarians, and particularly in government, there is a huge role to be played in supporting families to do just that. And mothers are crippled by stress. There are rocketing prices, and that isolation that people experience in society today, the way it is formed, that just doesn't have the support available to deal with the level of crisis that is this very acute period at the moment. And I know we've had a lot of talk about parental leave and really pushing on that paternity leave, and clearly it comes down to money. For an awful lot of families, they can't afford the dad to take parental leave as well as the mum. And I know the government and the Minister spoke quite powerfully about that, and I really hope that we see the government taking steps. But also there's the absence in many localities of Sure Start centres that used to provide some of that support for mothers that feel very isolated. And I know we're finally seeing the rebirth, to some extent, of Sure Start through the children's hubs, which are very welcome, but there's been that gap, and there's still a real gap in between. And so many mothers are carrying that burden on their own, and that has been the case for some time, but they're now carrying it also with the crushing anxiety about the rising prices. And I don't know about you, but every time I go to the shops, I'm shocked by the amount that the products that I buy on a weekly basis go up on a week by week. So from that isolation, we see worsening maternal mental health, and the statistics show that this is already with us. And so that economic disenfranchisement, that deeply entrenched inequality, and the impact on children of that deepening maternal mental health challenge is already becoming evident. One of the mums who spoke to me referred to the soaring costs as always in my head, constantly, every day, every time, trying to work out what to make for dinner, what they can buy from the shops. She says it's never out of my head. And she can already see the impact on her child, who knows now not to ask for anything until payday. And clearly that period where nothing can be bought is getting longer every month. It's not getting shorter. So things are getting harder for families, not easier. And so for many of these families, what's really been hard in the preparation for this debate is that raising a child, for many, is no longer a source of joy and hope. It's a source of stress and anxiety, and that we cannot sustain as a society. So that call for statutory parental pay is just another addition to that clamouring call for change that's already on top of the discussions we've had about the cost of childcare, the cost of housing, and before that, the crisis of food banks, which has now become normalised. So, you know, we're just going from a bad situation to a worse one, really, and I think we need to turn that round. So, whilst I am encouraged by the Minister's response, and I don't doubt her personal commitment to these issues, I really hope that the government has listened today to what these parents have said. But my final word goes to our petition creator, Nicola Sheridan, who, amongst all of the preparations during pregnancy and childbirth, has done the heroic thing of starting a petition and bringing this issue to the House to be discussed and debated, and so that those voices of those parents that are struggling are heard. And I know, and I hope she doesn't mind me saying so, that she did this because she knows she's the fortunate one, and there are many who are not in as fortunate a position as she is. And I think she's done a truly heroic thing bringing this issue to Parliament today. And I only hope that the Minister has been restricted to what she can say in response to this debate, but that she will take it away, will give it to the various government departments who can truly make the difference in many aspects of these concerns, and that we do see that change and that support for families, because the future of our children being born today is too important to leave to chance.
The question is that this House has considered E-petition 617155 relating to the cost of living and parental leave and pay. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.